Call the meeting to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I invite you to join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
So we have new mics today. I'm just curious, can the people in the back row hear us? Yes? Okay.
How about the front row?
How about the front row, yeah? Roll call, please.
Gehrig?
Here.
Grinberg?
Here.
Epcorn?
Here.
Strand?
Here.
Mahoney?
Here. Fargo Fire Captain Ben Willie has been named to Fire Instructor of the Year by the North Dakota Firefighters Association. Captain Willie has been in the fire department for 16 years. And that's an honor for him, isn't it? Yeah, that's a great idea. Fargo Class Public Health Environment Health Division has hosted a seminar on February 28th for aquatic facility operators. Yes, someday there will be summer. This seminar is voluntarily free of charge and open to all aquatic operators in North Dakota. Attendees will learn about the requirements for water quality, facility operations, and safety. The seminar will also include roundtable discussion with the local pool consultants. Contact Fargo Class Public Health for questions and additional information. Desi, this is for both commercial and local people that have pool? Indoor, outdoor pools. Think? Good. The library has several interesting programs coming up the next couple of weeks, including Crafternoons for Kids. A French film series continues with the films My Life as a Zucchini on February 26th and The Jaguar on February 28th. The History Book Club will meet February 26th to discuss Michael Maffal's book, From Cold War to Hot Peace, an American ambassador to Putin's Russia. And Seusstastic Day on March 2nd, which celebrates Dr. Seuss' birthday as part of Read Across America Day. The only thing I'm sad about, usually we have reading in the schools on that day, which is Seuss Day, so I'm not quite sure when we're going to do that. March is also the Youth Art Month, and to celebrate, the library is holding its 10th annual Design a Bookmark contest, which is open to all ages. The police are at it again. Renovation work on the south half of the new police department building has started. Some of the projects involve moving the gym to the second level, and an existing gym area will be used to expand locker rooms. The building also needs recabling with Cat 6A cable. There is a national shortage of that cable, and there is a waiting list. Once the cabling is complete, the investigations division will move to the second floor to work as it continues to work on the first floor now. Public Works. This winter snowfall has tested everybody in the city, their patience and their time, especially the city public works and street departments. Here are some interesting statistics from Ben Dow. Since January 1st, the street department has used 53,484 gallons of fuel performing snow removal. The street department staff has worked 5,073 hours of overtime, and there have been 10,331 truckloads of snow hauled. The cost of the snow equipment repairs to date is $179,000, and $263,000 has been spent on contractor trucks to haul snow. Ben said the city uses up to 4,200 gallons of diesel in a 24-hour period of snow event. Ben, are you about done for the winter, or do you have a little more to do? Yeah. So Tony Grinberg, who is in Mexico, probably doesn't appreciate the minus 25 degrees we had this morning, but Tony, hope you're doing well. Is there a motion to approve the order of agenda, moving item 15 from consent agenda to the regular agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Aye.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the February 11th, 2019 regular meeting?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carried. And is there a motion to approve the consent agenda items 1 through 31, excluding item 15, which have been moved to the regular agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote.
Gehrig?
Yes.
Strand?
Yes.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Mahoney.
Aye. Move to the regular agenda. We're going to have an update of the Greater Fargo-Moorhead Economic Development Corporation, explained by Joe Rosso. Welcome, Joe, to our new chambers. Hope you like it.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you very much. I was just noticing that it's 5:05, so 5 minutes into the City Commission agenda, and item 32 is already up. I would say that efficiency of government is taken seriously here, so appreciate that. I had an opportunity to speak and give a presentation to all of you a few months ago, just a few months into my tenure as the CEO of the Greater Fargo-Moorhead EDC, and really welcome the opportunity to provide another update to the Commission today. One faux pas on my behalf is not providing a PowerPoint and seeing the great digital communications here to the citizens. I'll be sure in the future to do that. But I did provide some documents to the Commission, one-page summary of activities and an additional attachment on some of the workforce initiatives taking place within the region. I just want to highlight a few of the items that were in that document that I provided to you, and of course, take any questions or comments that any of you have. First and foremost, one of the things that I mentioned my first time before you was that coming to you now and in the future, I really wanted to focus on the outcomes of the work that we're doing on behalf of the region and, of course, specifically the city of Fargo, and then to talk a little bit about some of the pipeline, meaning some of the activity that we feel is nearing completion here this calendar year, and things we'll be able to report out over time. In 2018, I just wanted to report to the Commission that our organization, our staff, worked closely with 15 different Fargo-based companies to help them with assistance with growing their operations here within the city and within the regional economy, that these companies had committed to well over 185 jobs that they would hire. And the kind of impacts that those direct jobs have on what we call indirect and induced jobs was another 173. So well over 350 jobs are being committed to being created here in our regional economy with a total payroll of over $20 million to the marketplace. And when we look at the work that our organization does on behalf of these primary sector businesses, when it comes to workforce development, I can report that last year the EDC helped to administer more than $1.25 million of job credit assistance that the companies paid to the state, that through the state job credit program came back to them to support the job training of their employees, which we know is important to have skilled workforce here within our regional economy. As far as kind of the immediate future, we're working on 11 different projects that are looking seriously at Fargo. Companies in manufacturing, IT, value-added ag, and distribution are noted there in the report. And we continue to manage the Growth Initiative Fund, which is a fund that both the city of Fargo, West Fargo, and Cass County supported well over 20 years ago. And we've been managing that since the mid-90s. And happy to report that in the last year, 8 different companies within the city of Fargo were able to obtain loan funds. Now, these are loans, these aren't grants, to support the growth of their business here in our regional economy. If you look on the back of that front and back one-page report, I'll just highlight a couple other things to note, especially as it relates to the near future. Last year, there were 5 opportunity zones that were designated within the city of Fargo and 1 in Moorhead, and we're working very closely to build out some programming around that opportunity zone legislation. This is federal legislation to help with development and revitalization of different parts of our community. So working closely with Jim Gilmore and our other partners in the region to do more in the way of getting information out. There are about 80 opportunity zone investors nationally, and we'll be working closely with the Department of Commerce for the state of North Dakota to identify ones that marry up very well with the types of businesses here within our regional economy. I also wanted you to know that recently we hired our Chief Business Development Officer, Ryan Osheim. Ryan comes with a great background both in government, worked for Senator Dorgan for a while as a state economic development director, and also in several industry sectors, two very important to our regional, and that's precision ag and UAS. And so we're getting much more involved in that from what I'd call a targeted recruitment strategy, but also to assist the existing assets that we have in the region. Lastly, I'll just note from a community development perspective, we have a lot of companies here who are looking to fill existing jobs. And so part of the services that we offer is for those higher level positions that many of our companies are challenged with filling. We offer a tour that we support the companies and their families who are coming into our region. We provided 9 of those community tours here recently. And we're also continuing to work on several workforce initiatives. I provided to the Commission a 2-page summary of the work that not only we've done, but other partners, whether it was the CVB or the United Way, for example. And 2 things to note on that from a community development standpoint. In the last couple of years, we've supported 2 housing or affordable housing projects, as well as 7 different child care facilities. These are again with loan funds, not grants, to support their operations and growth here in Fargo and in our region. So with that, I take any questions or comments you might have.
One of the questions we had about the opportunity zone, it's our opportunity for low-income housing. I think Commissioner Strand's been concerned about that. I know we have different areas designated. Would that be an opportunity for low-income housing?
Yeah, I think it would be. I think one of the things that we've been talking to some of the housing experts. We are not housing experts as an EDC, but our GIF program has provided some dollars to various housing. I think the question is how are we defining affordable or low-income housing? Is this workforce housing? Is this the type of housing that's going to support individuals who are taking jobs in the community that are needed to be filled or they're creating? And so coming up with that, it's probably a broader definition than just even workforce housing. I think as the EDC, that's where our focus is, because that's where our primary sector companies are looking for their job growth. But I think, yes, there should be, that development could take place within an opportunity zone.
Mr. Strand.
Thank you. And, I'm glad to hear your involvement with the Community Land Trust. I'm curious if you have any previous experience with that or any sense of how far we could go with that in our community, or I know this is real new to all of us.
Right. Actually, John, I'm not directly in the organizations I've run, haven't been. But last month we, through our GIF board, as we were looking at what are we going to be investing in going forward, we looked at the stock of child care spots in the market and realized through discussions with the United Way and others that we feel we've addressed that for the time being, but it's the affordable housing component that is going to continue, I think, to be a challenge for the market, kind of holistically, not just as it relates to primary sector. And so that board challenged us, myself and John Mahacek, who oversees our GIF funds, to gather around some of the expertise of housing in the market to get a better understanding of this, so that when we do make decisions on how to invest those dollars, we're doing it what I call a team effort versus just as an organization. So we're learning as we go on that aspect of it. And part of the reason is because in a way it's a step away from directly assisting the primary sector companies, but we know if we don't, this is going to be something that's going to affect us. It already is to some extent, but I think it's going to affect us even more as a community.
And if we look to other communities, we can see what's coming our way.
Oh, absolutely.
So the more proactive we all are.
Yeah, I mean, and bigger markets, obviously, that are seeing this, and you're hearing about it nationally. Having just moved from Colorado Springs in the Denver region, housing costs in parts of Denver have gotten to the point where you will pay $420 a square foot for new condo housing. And then you talk about what's happening in Seattle, and of course with Microsoft here seeing that, they just committed to a $500 million investment to help address the housing issue. So yeah, these things are on the horizon for a market like ours that continues to have steady growth. And I think that overall, the housing cost here, from what we hear from our employers, and even myself moving into the market 7 years ago, were surprisingly high.
Thank you.
Any other comment? Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And maybe on our website, at least you'd have a report there that they could see in your report that you sent us as well.
We'll pull something
that we can
together,
arrange to
put that out there.
on. Thank you very
Absolutely.
much. Chief Dixon, you have a report, annual report of the fire department, which the commissioners all received a copy, I believe. Yep.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. It's a privilege to stand in front of you again. A little earlier than we have been for the last number of years. We got our work done a little quicker this year in getting our report together for you. So glad to be here. It's hard to believe I've been here. I'm working on my 8th year here, and I think last year was by far most successful. And I couldn't be more proud to be the fire chief here in Fargo and working for the citizens and getting the great relationship with the staff here in the city as well. So I want to thank you for that opportunity and just recognize a couple things that happened last year. It was a big year for us. We continued to work hard. Each year I set a goal of making sure that we equip and train and motivate our folks to provide the best service that we can to the citizens. And we understand that the best value that we can provide to our community is for them not to have a need for us to call. So we work hard, and our number one goal is to work through prevention and see what we can do within our community to prevent things from happening. The sad part is that hasn't happened. We continue to grow with our number of responses. Each year we see that climb. There's the wrong button there. We'll try that one. So you can see our calls and our responses by our stations continue to grow. We did see a slight dip in the downtown area last year. We dropped about 100 calls there, but we picked them up in other areas of the town. You can see I didn't add 2 fire stations without telling you. Those are just there for planning purposes. Stations 8 and 9, we keep records for those where we should be looking for fire stations in the future. And you can see the Station 8 area, which is the Davies High School area, continues to grow. A couple of years ago, we were at 100 responses, and now we're at 332. And as we continue to add rooftops and people living out there, they're calling for service on a more regular basis. So that's one of the areas that we're going to need to concentrate on in the very near future here.
So do I have to wait till you get to 3,000 or 1,000, or what are you thinking?
Well, I think we're getting really close here at when we get to that 400 number because of our response times. And one of the next slides you'll see is by the number of calls that go down there, the stations that respond to that area, it takes them longer to get there, and we're seeing some extended response times because of that. So it's one of those things that we need to look out for those citizens in that area of town. That is a growing priority and thing that we need to keep looking forward. You can see our responses. We stepped over 11,000 for this year, and we're currently on pace. Hopefully January was just an anomaly for us, but we're currently on pace to go over 14,000 if we stay where we're at. It was an extraordinarily busy month in January. Those cold days, I think, had something to do with it. We saw responses, over 50 responses a day for about a week there in January. So that's gets to be a little taxing after a while. Just a heat map of where we're going to calls on. You can see some of the key areas in downtown, in the Station 1 response area, those red areas where we're seeing a larger number of responses. But it's starting to become more of a green all over for regular responses, and we're starting to see a few of those areas in the south of 52nd Street. As we start to get more apartments and more people living down there, we seem to have more responses there as well. You can see by planning zone, this is just another pictorial of that, where all of our stations are located and where we're responding to in those areas of town. The types of calls that we're going on, still about 65% of our calls are medically based, whether that's a car accident or a medical emergency. We're just under 6,400 responses. Fires were down last year. That's a good thing. We were down about 25 fires from last year. The good news is the causes of fires have still stayed the same. It's still 3 main causes of fire, men, women, and children, are the general cause of fire in our community, whether it's cooking, discarded smoking materials, or not using appliances and things in the most proper way. It's generally a people problem that's causing fire issues within the community. It's not, fire's just not leaping out of walls, electricity's not leaping out of walls. It's a human action in there that's causing a lot of those issues. You can see here our most common types of fires were building fires. I talked with Commissioner Garrick just before the meeting here, and he was surprised that we had that many vehicle fires, but that tends to happen on a pretty regular basis as well within the community. But those numbers are staying about the same. Most common type of building fire is cooking related. The second most common type is deck fires, generally related to either cooking or unattended smoking materials. Fire loss last year was a great number as far as fire loss goes with a community our size. To see a number under 2 million for a community of approximately 125,000 people. National and regional averages say that we should be expecting between $4 million and $5.5 million in fire loss in a year, and to be at 2, that's a pretty good number for our community. When you look at it, there was $178 million worth of property that was involved in fire, and we only lost $2 million of it. That's 9,900% savings, what was done there. So we're really happy about that. Again, we don't want to see fires and things like that, but the community can be rest assured that we're doing a great job and getting to things in a quick manner. Part of this is part of the reason why we attained the ISO Class 1 classification last year. We're one of 72 communities in the country that are an accredited fire department and have an ISO Class 1. That puts us in pretty rarefied air as far as I'm concerned. There's not very many people in very many cities that can tout the fire safety that's happening in our community. Like I said before, we're starting to see a little bit of a prolonged response. We want to be at 90% of our calls in 8 minutes and 12 seconds, according to the documents that are part of our accreditation. We didn't meet that this last year. We were about 17 seconds behind. And that just becomes, it could be, there's many factors that could be there. It could be weather conditions, multiple calls happening at the same time. We're in the process of analyzing why that is. But as I said, as we have more calls further and further out, it takes longer for us to get there and mitigate the situations that are there. We continue to work on that, and we address all the issues from call processing, how long it takes the dispatchers at Red River Regional to answer the call and notify us, to how quickly our folks, once they're notified, are on the trucks and out the door, making sure that our drivers know the territory, no road construction, those kind of things that are in there that can slow that travel time down. So we're continually assessing that, and we're addressing that in a meeting tomorrow, and trying to work forward in how we're going to improve that throughout this next year. Some of the major accomplishments.
When you get that done, Chief, could you send an action report to us so we know what your plans are to get that back to
Sure,
90?
we're going to have a good discussion, so we'll make sure we talk about that. Major accomplishments. Again, we were retained our accredited agency status. We do that on an annual basis through the accreditation process. We file annual compliance reports. We do that in July of every year. In August, they notified us that we retained that status. They said we're still a credible agency. We got our ISO Class 1 rating. We revised our strategic plan. That was a big undertaking. We started that last April. We brought in members of the community. We had staff from within city departments and within the fire department met and talked about what do we want to see from a fire department in the future? What do the citizens want? And we put that into a report that I've provided you this afternoon. We participated in regional response training exercises as part of our mutual aid agreement with the Department of Emergency Services. We'll continue to do that again through this next year. We made an assistant chief promotion and a battalion chief promotion, 2 captains promotion, and a deputy fire marshal. We had 4 retirements. 2 of those were normal retirements. 2 retirements that I'm actually kind of proud of because they were early retirements, but two very high-performing members of our organization were tapped by other organizations within the state to go and lead those organizations. Assistant Chief Gary Lorenz was tapped to be the fire chief in Grand Forks. He's been up there almost a year now. And Deputy Fire Marshal Doug Nelson was tapped to be the state fire marshal, and he is now running the state fire marshal's office and doing a great job. Both of them are. So we're, those are, you hate to see people go, but you like to see them go for the right reasons, and can't be more proud of those two guys. We hired 5 new people last year. That was a good thing. We appreciate that we can keep our staffing. We're still 3 people behind, so the application period is open right now for hiring firefighters. It closes on Friday. So if you know anybody, I'll make a plug that get your application, and we'll test at the end of March. And then some of the last things that probably a lot of people don't know, but our folks, on their days off, from working at the fire department, they're out working hard and doing a lot of things. They're in Hornbachers every July doing MDA Fill the Boot. They do that for 3 days, and guys and gals are sitting there and they're collecting money to help raise money for MDA. They're out doing the Salvation Army bell ringing, and we lost the competition to the realtors, but we beat the cops, so we're pretty happy about that. Our guys are out every year cooking burgers. This last year was in the Civic Plaza to help with a Christmas gift, and so that's another way that they give back. And then on Christmas Day, they go, before Christmas, they go out and buy a bunch of gifts for kids that are in the hospital. And on Christmas Day, we send the fire truck there and guys in uniform and deliver gifts to the kids that are in the hospitals. So those are just a couple of the things that they're doing that make this a great community and make it a great place for me to be the fire chief of. And with that, I stand for any questions.
Any questions of the commissioners? Commissioner Garrick?
It's clear you guys don't sit around waiting for fires here in Fargo, so good work and all the extra things you guys do. The number of runs you guys do has gone up every year for forever. In 2009, it was about 4,000, and this last year it was right around 11, so you were tripling that number here in a relatively short period of time. In your strategic plan, you have a goal of determining alternate response models for EMS. What's our goal then? Are we trying to reduce calls? Are we trying to find better ways to decide if we need to send you guys on these calls? We have a lot of false alarms. I think it was 1,200 or something like that. We have mostly EMS calls for you guys with very few actual fires. So what's the idea? What's our goal for getting it lower?
Well, we're looking at those different response models. One of them that we did implement last year, instead of sending 5 fire trucks to a call for alarms going off in a building, we changed that to 2 to a ladder truck and an engine to reduce some wear and tear on vehicles. And that's proven successful. Our total apparatus movements have gone down quite a bit because of that. That's one way that we're looking at that. Making sure that we're positioned in the right place. That's another way that we can do that. And it's our first goal really within the department is have a strong prevention program. What can we do through education, engineering, those type of things that we can put in place that people don't need to call us. Maybe there's better ways to do that and looking for alternative responses on medicals. One of the great things that I have an opportunity to be is a commissioner for the accreditation agency that accredits us. And so I get to read all kinds of reports from them and listening to what other people are doing within their department. And I just read an article of a report in Oklahoma City that they're looking at alternative responses, and they had it was a grant through United Way of $100 and some thousand to fund an alternative, like 8 to 5 vehicle to take on some of those responses. As long as we have people here, I don't know that we're going to change that. Hopefully we can change some things culturally, looking at the reasons for the call and try to put preventive measures in there. But we're being very successful on the fire side. Now we have to look into the EMS side and work with our partners there as well and see what we can do. That's part of what we're going to sit down and work on over the next couple of years with that goal in the strategic plan, is how can we reduce those responses and what are alternative ways that we can look at responding to those.
Mr. Strand?
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, I'm just curious, last mid-year, we heard from your department concerns about wages and salaries compared to other benchmarks in other communities. I'm just curious, you know, it's tough for folks to speak up about wages, especially in our world. How's that progressing, and what's your sense of where we're aiming with that?
Well, we're in the process of a study. The mayor has directed Jill Manette, myself, and Chief Todd to work on a study. We're in the information gathering phase right now. Actually, I've done some on my own. One of our assistant chief has done some. We're gathering that information. I know Jill has a bunch of information coming in. We have a goal to have that done in the very near future. I can't remember the date off the top of my head, but I know we want to have something to you by the end of March of where we're at, and kind of taking a big, broad look at where we're at within the region, how we compare.
Part of the issue there, Commissioner Strand, is it takes a while to get the data. So he's getting data, Jill's getting data, everybody's getting data. They want to make sure they have all the data. In addition to that, Chief Todd has had some local data, what's been going up with West Fargo and Moorhead. So we're trying to look at all the data so we don't miss anything. I think that's what the attempt of the chiefs are. But we have pushed them because you're right, it's almost mid-year. It comes up on us quickly. So hopefully at the end of March, they should have a report. Thank you. Any other discussion? Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
And we don't have to file, that goes to file anyway, right? We don't have to make any action on that. Public hearings, Blue Water Creek, 4th edition, 4609 33rd Avenue South. Approval recommended by Planning Commission on 1/30/19. Zoning change to repeal and reestablish conditional overlay. First reading of the rezoning ordinance. Plat of the Blue Water Creek, 4th edition. And Donald Kress with the new sweater comes out today.
Yes, sir.
It matches with the commission room. Thank you.
Well, thank you, sir. I hadn't actually planned that. I think this will be the last sweater of the year. Hopefully, the next time I'm here, it'll be somewhat springier. So we'll
I hope so.
adjust the wardrobe accordingly. Good evening, Commissioners. Donald Kress of the Department of Planning and Development. Item 34A, as the mayor has stated, is a minor plat and conditional overlay modification for the Blue Water Creek 4th edition. Minor plats are usually on the consent agenda, but since a zone change is attached to this minor plat, it becomes part of the public hearing item. A conditional overlay modification is reviewed as a zone change. That is, it goes through the same hearing process as a zone change, though the underlying limited commercial zoning on this property is not changing. As you see, the property here, the property here is located in the Blue Water Creek commercial development. This is 32nd Avenue South and 45th Street South. And this is the large property here, currently undeveloped. There are some other things. This is the Urban Plains area. This is the XL Energy substation here. The zoning is limited commercial, as we said. And with this limited commercial zoning, there was a conditional overlay that was originally established in January of 2018, ordinance number 5128. These conditional overlays, such as this one, include provisions for building materials, color schemes, facades, screening, pedestrian connectivity, landscaping, and land uses that are regulations beyond what would ordinarily be in the zoning ordinance. The current overlay prohibits vehicle repair, which is a land use vehicle repair, and requires that flat roofs and rooftop equipment be entirely concealed from the public view by parapet and/or screen walls. The proposed amended conditional overlay would allow for vehicle repair and would reduce the amount of rooftop screening requirements to a minimum of 50% of the height of the rooftop equipment. Staff feels the allowance of vehicle repair to allow that land use in this development and a reduction of the rooftop screening is adequate due to the fact that the property is not located along an arterial. So here again we have the arterials of 32nd and 45th, but this property is off those. As we see in the plat here, this property is proposed, this 15.9 acre property is proposed to create two lots, Lot 1 and the larger Lot 2, which may undergo future subdivision. It is my understanding from the applicant that there is a vehicle-related use that would go on to Lot 1 eventually. And Mr. Volmuth, Nate Volmuth from Paces Lodging is with us this evening. He might wish to address the commission or answer your detailed questions about the project. We have received no comments from the public about this project. Your packet includes an ordinance prepared by the City Attorney's Office. The Planning Commission's recommendation is, then this is the conditional overlay here. We just talked about, it just shows how it's, this is an excerpt from the modification that's included in your packet. And the recommendation is stated on this, in your staff report and shown on the screen, Commissioners. That concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Is there anyone present who wishes to speak to this change? Anyone present wishing to speak? We'll close the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
Second.
Thank you, Tony. No discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Gehrig?
Yes.
Strand?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Don. Item B has been withdrawn. It's Prairie Products LLC. That item has been withdrawn. Item 35, recommendation from the Tax Exempt Review Committee to approve the City of Fargo Tax Review Committee policy and guidelines, delayed from the 1/18/19 regular meeting. Jim Gilmore to explain.
Since your last meeting, I have had a chance to meet and go through the policy briefly with Commissioner Gehrig, and Commissioner Pepcorn and I met with Commissioner Strand and kind of walked through all the details of it. So I won't go through all the details I went through a month ago, but maybe touch on a few things I wanted to make sure you were aware of. Some of the major changes in the tax increment financing policy are that the review process now goes through the Tax Exempt Review Committee rather than the Finance Committee. That way it's consolidated with the other incentives that we have regarding remodeling and the payment in lieu of taxes policy. The new policy also includes specific review criteria to guide both applicants and the city in making decisions on whether or not tax increment financing is important. The policy also broadened out and includes the downtown. Previously, we did not have a policy specific to the downtown. Changes in the how we're going to use the payment in lieu of taxes policy regarding housing. In the downtown, previously we had a set policy that you would get a 10-year exemption. There was no financial review. It was simply 100% exemption for the first 5 years, followed by a 75% exemption in the second 5 years. The new policy calls for a review of the finances to determine if the level of assistance is appropriate, but then it also allows, if needed, to have that exemption extend for 15 years, with only the first 5 years being at the 100% level and the rest based on the need of the project. Regarding low-income housing projects throughout the city, the previous policy was that they had to pay a certain percentage of the rent. There wasn't a financial review. The new policy would be there would be a financial review, and that the city is open to a 0% payment for up to 20 years to help with some of the more difficult to put together housing projects for lower income people. Again, this policy allows it to go longer and a greater subsidy. However, there's a financial review that was not previously in place. At your previous meeting, you had asked for a report on existing TIF districts. I've been working with the finance department, and we'll have that report ready in 4 weeks. There's a couple TIF districts we need to determine what the final projects are going to be before we can accurately estimate how long those would go. I'll just open it up for questions now, if you have any questions regarding the policy.
Commissioners, do you have any questions, Jim Gilmore? Mr. Gehrig?
Sure. Jim, we spoke earlier today, and I asked you in what way is this policy further restricting incentives? And we had a conversation about that. If you could go ahead and tell everybody else about that.
They mentioned the pilot policy in the downtown. Previously it had been any new housing qualified. Now we're doing a financial review that wasn't done before. And so in that way, we're taking a closer look at the applicants. Probably one other thing that I neglected to mention on page 11, we have a more defined policy for monitoring, requiring reports on job creation, noting that if they meet the goals, then we would no longer have reporting. However, if they were not meeting their goals, it would go back to the committee for review. And if they're still not able to meet those goals, that the city commission could hold a public hearing and require the recipient to pay back prorated based on how many jobs are created. So the review process is, I think, better defined than it was in the previous policy.
And that's certainly a good thing. However, if they do qualify, like you were saying, we're now offering longer incentives for a higher percentage in the downtown.
Or, yes, for both low-income housing and market housing in the downtown, that could go longer.
Sure. So, I mean, that's, for me, I was hoping to at least see some limiting factors in this new document. I think that we're accelerating the incentives, not rearing back on them, which is why I can't support it.
Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. Jim, I'm just curious what kind of feedback you got from the public? Because we know, I'll preface it, if there's one thing we hear about, it's incentives from people, and yet I'm not sure we hear much from them when the rubber hits the road.
Yeah, I think that's the case. We made multiple attempts to put out, information that we were doing this. We get a lot of feedback from people that are in the development business or economic development business or affordable housing business, providing us with input on how the process should stay the same or change. I think I only received 2 phone calls during the entire process. One person critical of Block 9, another concerned with some of the impacts on the Roosevelt neighborhood.
I'll continue, Mayor. For the sake of context, there's aspects of our programming here, incentives and exemptions, that I'm supportive of, and there's others I'm still working on. And it's my sense that the Tax Exempt Review Committee and all of us, I hope, are willing to go forward to study further what we could do. And my biggest concern is affordable housing built into our incentive plans. And we're looking for examples out there of what others do. The closest, best example, and I have a motion that I've worked with Jim on crafting and presenting that will take us down the path of studying inclusionary housing policies. But I'm still trying to figure out how we can, if somebody gets an incentive, how we can assure the public there's an affordable component in there for somebody, whether it's apartments or ownership or whatever. And that's mostly TIFs, mostly pilots in my sense. So when we get to this discussion about the actual vote of the motion for the recommendations of the committee, I will be offering a motion about affordable housing, studying it. And my hopes are that on the other side of this process, we might have some examples and benchmarks that we can build into local policies. But it's a quandary. Commissioner Pepcorn, you've addressed this issue of affordability as well. And I think we're all trying to figure it out and see what works best for us. But that's my one gray area with this policy coming out of committee now, is I'm not on the same page for pilots and affordable housing as the committee is.
Mr. Grinberg, do you have any comments?
No, I'm following the discussion, and the affordability of housing incentive piece. That's still I think as Commissioner Strand said, it's so hard to get your head around and define what that is. That would be my added comment.
Very good. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion. If you don't mind, I'll make a couple quick comments too. I just want to thank, well, first of all, Jim, thank you for your hard work. You've done a great job. I also, Ben Hushke isn't here today, and Ken Costin from our staff. Maybe Ben is here. I can't see him.
He's over to the left.
Sorry.
Too big of a place.
There you are, Ben. I just want to thank all of our staff because it's really close to 2 years that we've been working on this. Ben, with the Tax Exempt Review Committee, was the contact person who got all the comments, and Jim went through and redlined it. It was a tremendous amount of work, and we did get a tremendous amount of feedback. And so I think it was well done. We didn't go as quickly as we had predicted, but I think it's very well done. I do think there's things that we can work on in the future, like, you know, obviously the affordable housing thing is important, and I do think that's a good point. But I think if you look at what we've done, it's very well done. I'm very proud of how it's turned out, and the future, we can always make adjustments. And one of the things, Tony was, Commissioner Gehrig was concerned about clawbacks, and we do have that in there now. And in the past, that was not as specific as it could have been. And so I do think that was a good thing. So all in all, I'd say it's a very good document. There's always, we can always make improvements and changes in the future, but for now, I am very proud of it, and that's why I'll make the motion. Thank you.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the other, and we've addressed this before, but it's worth mentioning to the public again. You also hear about FedEx. You know, there's Block 9, and then there's FedEx as far as what flashpoints there are with the public. But it's really important, I think, for us to also remind ourselves that the committee and the commission changed the criteria for job creation with these incentives. And it used to be that they'd measure the wages from $7 to $9, $9 to $11, and $11 to $13. Now the incentive programming, the points start at $15 an hour if people are coming to the public for support for their business plans, and so on. So I think that's critically important to know, that if people are at the public trough for assistance, that at least they're paying a living wage as a criteria that we advance on the commission. And I think that's a real valuable enhancement that was put into these programs within the last couple of years.
Mr. Strand, are you bringing an amendment to the motion?
Mayor, I have a separate motion that I don't know if it's an amendment necessarily, but we could present it as I'm not sure what the best process would be.
Let's try it as an amendment and see how that's received.
Okay. I move that we study the need for and make recommendations on an inclusionary housing policy for the city of Fargo. The study should look at housing needs, available incentives, and the need for additional resources and incentives. Recommendations for implementation should be part of the policy. Participants should be the city administration, planning and development, and the Housing and Redevelopment Authority.
Is there a second?
Is that in addition to?
This is Tony. I think my preference would be we vote on the TIF policy, and then Commissioner Strand's motion to be taken as a separate issue to move forward. Voting these together just seems should be separate. I'm
okay with that.
You're okay, John? Okay, so we'll vote on the primary motion of the TIF policy as presented, Tax Exempt Review Committee that brought us this policy and guidelines forward. That's been first and seconded. Any other discussion on that item? No? Roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn.
Aye.
Grinberg.
Aye.
Gehrig.
No.
Strand.
No.
Mahoney.
Aye. Now we'll go to John's next motion. We'll do it as a motion.
Okay, thank you. I move that we study the need for and make recommendations on an inclusionary housing policy for the city of Fargo. The study should look at housing needs, available incentives, and the need for additional resources and incentives. Recommendations for implementation should be part of the policy. Participants should be city administration, planning and development, and Housing and Redevelopment Authority.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Strand.
Yes.
Grinberg.
Aye.
Gehrig.
Yes.
Pepcorn.
No.
Mahoney.
Aye. Moving on. Recommendation to purchase Oak Grove and Park Christian land. Purchase agreement with Oak Grove Foundation Properties and Park Christian School. Resolution of governing body of the application. Resolution related to acquisition and financing of the Southwest Regional Stormwater Management Project. Authorizing purchase of the land, creating an improvement district, FP19A. Directing development of the project, expressing intent to resell the remainder and intention to reimburse for loan and bond proceeds. Contract for deed with Oak Grove Foundation Properties and Park Christian School. It's going to be Bruce Grubb. Oh, okay. Here we're confusing me up. I'm Brenda Daring. Thank you.
My apologies, but thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. For a number of years, the engineering office has been having conversations with the owners of a 244-acre tract of land, South Fargo, along 64th Avenue South, right up against Drain 27. And more recently, they approached us once again indicating that they were going to be selling the land, and they wanted to inquire about the city's interest in that land. And this is low land, and because of that, the engineering office wanted to look at the land from a regional stormwater service perspective. And so the engineering office did that. They completed an evaluation of the property and the surrounding properties as well, taking a true regional stormwater approach to this. They came up with a 2,300 acre service area, and then they applied our current stormwater requirements and did a comparison if each landowner kind of went on their own versus a regional type of approach. Obviously, when regional approaches are possible, they have a lot of benefits. And the evaluation that the engineering study performed, I think you would find really interesting and informative. So the engineering office did prepare a brief PowerPoint presentation tonight to show you what their evaluation concluded. And with that, Brenda Derrig, our city engineer, is here to go through that PowerPoint and show you the results.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Just to give you a little background story is, we've got federal money and we're starting to work on the 64th Avenue overpass and construction project that will go from 25th Street and 45th Street and connect back in. Upon working on that 64th Avenue project, we also have been visiting with a couple of developers that are very close to starting some larger developments on the north and south side of 64th Avenue. So as we're looking at how we develop those areas, the second thing we started looking at is how do we provide stormwater services within that area, especially since, the closest drain to them is Drain 27 to the west, which is actually a couple of miles away from them. When you look at Drain 53 to the east, we're having to cross the interstate system to get to it. And so upon the evaluation, we decided to look at more regional and global and try and take a high-level look at what we could do in this area. So what we looked at is a drainage area of 2,300 acres. And this would get us all the way down to just south of 76th Avenue, and then from the interstate to Veterans Boulevard. Once you get south of 64th Avenue, on the west side of Veterans is actually the Horace ET. So that area will be the city of Horace one day. So some of the hurdles that we have here is the very flat topography that we have within the city, and then also the distance that we have to get to our legal drains. So a couple of things we looked at is how we've always installed our stormwater infrastructure in the past, which is trunk lines to the drains and then lift stations. So what you see here is just a snapshot within the city along Drain 27 from the interstate to about Veterans Boulevard. And all the red stars represent the lift stations we have placed. And then the yellow stars are gate wells that have outfalls into the river, but they don't have actually a lift station there. So our historic way of doing it is we would install trunk mains with multiple areas that would have lift stations to allow us to pump in when those drains come up. So why the Oak Grove Park Christian land? Well, it's actually 100% of it is in the 100-year floodplain, and on average, it needs 2 to 3 feet. It is 2 to 3 feet below the 100-year floodplain, and with the drainage swale that goes through the parcel, there's actually a max difference of about 5 feet of fill needed if it was to develop. So as we move to the east and towards the interstate, that topography actually raises and gets higher. So this makes a lot of sense to put a regional retention pond in that lower area. So we worked with one of our consultants to evaluate this area. So this slide looks at our historic way of how we would install our stormwater infrastructure, which typically about every mile, it would service a half mile to the north and to the south. We would have a trunk main that would take it to the drain. Some of the challenges here is the distance to get to drain 27 from the interstate, and then also the size of the pipes just due to the distance we have to go. So a lot of these pipes, typically we would get around the 60, 72 inch would be our larger trunk mains within the city. Here we're getting 84 and even up to the box culvert size just due to the distance we're going. The counteraction of that would be to have more trunk lines, but then that would also require more lift stations and a larger cost on that end, and more maintenance. So we're also looking at 4 lift stations on the way we usually do it. The other challenge we have is the 3 lift stations we'd be installing on the south are actually outside our city limits. They would be going into Horace's ET. So we would need to work with them on allowing us the right to get through their right of way and outfall into the drain there. We'd also be looking at multiple ponds. So each one of the squares here is the typical development way. The developer would install a regional pond, the storm sewer would all drain to the regional pond, then come out of the regional pond and go into our trunk system and then go to the drain. So once we looked at the 2,300 acres and did the installation according the way we historically do it, that cost ended up being about $55 million, which is about $26,000 per acre. So historically, throughout the city, we're usually running, I think it's about 17 to 22,000 an acre of what the trunk main is costing. So we wanted to go back and take another look at it, and is there something more we could do to try and assist with those costs and what costs you'd see. So it made sense to take a look at the Oak Grove and Park Christian land since it is so low. It would provide the retention requirements according to our growth plan. And so when you look at the regional retention that we're proposing right now, we would actually be providing the retention requirements for those developments, and then it would also handle the water quality requirements. It would reduce the lift stations from 4 to 1, and then it would also reduce that stormwater sizing. And we feel it's better utilization of the city of Fargo in the growth areas. Conceptually, you look at it, and I know you see lines and drains, but even in some of the conceptual developments, you could have it more like a drain, or you could have a chain of ponds. It could be up to the developer if they would like to make it into more of an amenity. When we go to this type of planning, we were down to about 19,000 an acre. So in a total cost of about 38 million. And then also with this, we're left with 80 acres of remnant land that we could look at reselling for development around the pond. So conceptually, the square footage on this parcel is what we need, but the shape can be any shape. And so as we look at selling off those 80 acres, we can work with developers on what they'd like to see that pond look like and what we can do to help them get the most of that remaining parcels for development. So in regards to the financing, we've got 244.38 acres at $27,500 per acre, which is a purchase price of $6,720,000. We have just finished our application for an SRF loan that would be, which could go towards the purchase of only the pond itself. And then also the lift station construction and the outfall with the pond. And so the additional loan, sorry about that. So what we'd be looking at then is we'd have about 2.2 million left of the 80 acres that are not part of that original, a part of that SRF loan. And so for that, I apologize. I thought I had this updated, but that we are recommending sales tax, infrastructure sales tax to pay for that remnant piece of land that can be resold. So some of the other benefits for the pond is we've got 3 construction projects in that area that are in the need of quite a bit of fill. So the first one is 52nd Avenue this summer. It's receiving federal funds and it's in the need of about 145,000 yards of fill. And right now our bid item includes them importing that fill. And so if this purchase was to go through, we would negotiate with them to have fill on site that would reduce that cost. The next project we have is 64th Avenue and 45th Street. We need quite a bit of fill to get that overpass ready and to overbuild the embankment for that. So that's about 220,000 and then 50,000 for 45th Street. And then in 2021, we'll be actually building 64th Avenue west of the overpass, and that's got a need of about 120,000 cubic yards. So with all these projects, our potential savings would be about 2.6 million when you use about savings of about $5 a yard from importing to having it on site. Some other uses we've talked about is being able to loamer the remaining 80 acres to help maybe bring that value up before we sell it, and then any other future city projects we'd have. And so once you even take a look at all these projects, there's a total of 1.4 million cubic yards of fill in that pond as a whole, and we'd still have about 700,000 remaining after all the projects are done. So our suggested motion today is to move to approve the resolution authorizing filing of the application with the North Dakota Department of Health for a loan under the Clean Water Act, a resolution relating to the acquisition and financing of Southwest Regional Stormwater Management Project, authorizing the purchase of the land, creating Improvement District FP 19-A, directing the development of project, expressing an intent to resell the remainder, an intention to reimburse from loan or bond proceeds, and the purchase agreement for the acquisition of land from Oak Grove Foundation Properties, LLC and Park Christian School, Inc., as presented.
Thank you.
I would take any questions.
Any discussion by the sellers? This is going to help you do great things, so you're not going to talk about that? Okay. You can come up to the mic, Dan. It's right here. I think this is exciting for the two organizations, I think, Dan. I just wanted you to comment that to the commissioners.
Mr. Mayor, other commissioners, yes, my name is Dan Boydie. I'm an attorney with the Boydie Law Firm. I represent Oak Grove. Park Christian's president, chairman, Shane Waslowski is here as well on behalf of Park Christian School. Yes, this piece of property is nothing short of a generational gift that was given to the schools by the former landowner. Of course, the challenge, neither one of these schools is in the land holding business. And so we've attempted over the course of time, a couple different ways to put this asset to good use. And I'm just super happy and pleased. The city has been good partners with Oak Grove over the years. Oak Grove has needed the city a number of times over the years. And so we're just tickled that we have something that you want, and we want to sell you that something. And we feel very blessed to have worked with the city over the course now of about a year and a half as we started to talk about this. And I know I speak for Oak Grove, and I'll take a shot here and say that I'm speaking for Park Christian, that we are very, very excited about this transaction and the opportunity that for these schools, it's just a tremendous opportunity. And I hope it serves a good public purpose as well.
Well, it helps us save a lot of money on doing retention ponds, and it helps us with the infrastructure out there quite a bit. So it's going to be a huge change for us if we finally have a plot of land that we can put some things into and then help a lot of areas around that area. And people probably remember before there was a big pond one time thought of being in South Fargo in that area. This is not as big as that big pond, which was part of our flood project at one time, but this serves a great purpose for us as far as the resource and retention, and helps us save a considerable amount of money, and the homeowners in that area will not be special as high because you don't have as much that has to go in that area. I open it up for motion.
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it, but I got a question.
Nope, that's fine. Discussion, Commissioner Garrick?
What if we don't get the loan? With the motion, it says all these things are together and doesn't say if we don't get the loan, are you still doing all these things?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Commissioner. Before we put that on the resolution, we made sure that we didn't have this project on something they call an intended use plan. And we got a hold of the North Dakota Department of Health, their Clean Water SRF program, talked to them about this. They got us slotted after we submitted a bunch of project information. We're now on their intended use program, and like Jim Ossow and I worked on a lot of Clean Water SRF loan programs. No guarantee, but in my 30-year history, have never had one not funded. So they essentially assured us it would be.
Good question. Any other discussion? Commissioner Strand?
Thank you. Brenda or Bruce, I'm just curious, how does this fit into the Plan B diversion path we're on now? Does it have any impact at all, or gain, or pros or cons relative to where we're at with that flood management plan?
I don't believe it does. This is strictly a local stormwater infrastructure plan here, but the good news is with a single large piece of infrastructure, you're able to benefit 2,300 acres. But this is independent of the diversion project.
Then, John, it's not a dry pond, so it's a wet pond, so it's going to be with water all the time. So the idea initially on that huge pond was a dry pond that you bring water into.
So there might be benefit there for ability to hold water in high water episodes.
Yes.
And just to give you an idea, is the blue part of the pond is the deeper part of the pond. The green part just has a 2% side slope. So during a heavy rain event, it allows the water to come up and then go down. So we've already met with the Park District because that is an area that could be programmed and used. And so we're starting to bring everyone in early, and we're all kind of pretty excited about the potential of what this could be and what we could use it for and what we could program in that area.
Recreational uses is what you're thinking, yeah. Any other discussion? Commissioner Garrick or Grinberg? Okay.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Gehrig?
Yes.
Strand?
Yes.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Mahoney?
Yes. Very good. Item 15, interfund loan policy and request portion of the interfund loan be used to acquire Border States Electric Facility. Ken Costin to explain. I think Commissioner Strand put this on, correct?
Good evening, Commissioners. Your Finance Committee is tasked with bringing forward policies and procedures that help us to administer the financial affairs of the city. In the case of interfund loans, the city has used interfund loans from time to time We may loan funds out of the general fund to some other project. We may loan funds from the enterprise funds, water, sewer, to help fund various projects. I did cite in my cover memo a couple of uses where we've done that. The baseball stadium, ironically, was funded by cash reserves back in 1995 to the tune of $5.2 million. And we've used some other smaller ones to help with the parking authority. In times where their cash balances are low, we may advance them funds and pay it back over time. So basically, it's just a financial tool to help us with that. But bear in mind, during this time when we'd use these loans, we never had a policy. We never had a policy on how to use them, how to term them, how to manage them. And so the Finance Committee met and drafted the policy that's included on your second page. And it does have some mandatory provisions and basically saying that it's prudent at times to use these types of loans. And the control points that are injected into the policy, I believe here would be with regard to the approval and use of it. And in the case of the way the policy is drafted, it says the Finance Committee will review all these requests and that loans in excess of $3 million would go to the City Commission. Those less than $3 million would just be approved and ratified by the Finance Committee, and that there'd be a certain amount of due diligence in determining if the fund that's borrowing the money has the ability to have that much cash to be able to do a loan, and that the fund that's receiving the loan would in fact have the ability to pay it back over a reasonable period of time. And so that's the task of your Finance Committee, is to review these types of transactions that come up from time to time. And again, from a historical perspective, we haven't used them very frequently, but there are good times to be able to use them. One of the advantages of just using your own internal cash is there's no closing costs, there's no financing costs, there's no soft costs, if you will, to get the deal brought forward, as there would be with regular traditional bonding. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have with regard to the policy. And the Finance Committee would like to have you approve the policy and also approve the use of that on the acquisition of the BSI, Border States facility that the Police Department is renovating and moving into. In the particular case of the interfund loan, there's a $2.3 million building that's north of the primary building that the Police Department will be in. And there's also some equipment both within the south building and in the north building that would be used by this interfund loan. So be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions? Commissioner Strand?
Thank you, Mayor. Kent, we visited earlier, but I'm just, and I have a motion I'll be, or an amendment I'll be advancing, but this $3 million threshold, is there a reason for that being what it is, or is it needed or not? If, for example, we were to advance this policy, which I will be suggesting, that all recommendations by the Finance Committee for use of this interagency loan fund would be approved by the Commission, would there be any downside to that?
You know, there really wouldn't be a downside. I think the committee just looked at the historical usage of loans in the past, the size and the magnitude and the frequency and that, and you know, with regard to small loans, there may be just budgetary reasons to want to do that over a very short term. So, you know, there isn't really a downside for you if you want to put it that all loans come forth to you for approval and ratification. That's fine too. I think the committee just perceived that some of these smaller transactions could be more routine as opposed to granting every single time.
And clarifying, this is a new policy, right? So it's our first go at it?
Yes, this is a brand new policy, and so if you want to amend the policy, feel free to make that recommendation.
To be fair, what happened is that interloan funding had been going on, and we said there should be a policy, and that's why this came tonight. And I could see from the Commissioner's point of view, you just as well could review every one because it's so infrequent. If there's only been 5 or 6 done, there's no reason any type of interloan could just come to the Commission. We could look at it and know that it's going on. You know, I don't have anything hard on that $3 million.
So Mayor, I have a motion I'd like to advance. I move we approve this recommended policy with the following modifications. On page 2, where it has mandatory requirements, the first sentence where it says the Finance Committee will review and approve inter-fund loans up to $3 million, no further approval is required. My recommendation is to strike that sentence entirely. And then the next bullet point would have the modified new policy. The City Commission will approve all inter-fund loans recommended by the Finance Committee.
That's this part, Tony. So is that a motion, John?
That's a motion.
Is there a second? Garrick, a second. Discussion?
What would have been the rationale for having just the Finance Committee approve this and not a customary City Commission final action?
Kent, I think his question is, why does the Finance Committee able to recommend it without having the Commission approve it?
I think we just looked at it just as a expeditious manner and a efficient ways and means of processing small value loans. From a control standpoint, it certainly makes sense for you to approve all of them. We believe that the committee level, a certain amount of trust should be bestowed to the Finance Committee to make sure they make good decisions on all of those.
Well, it's really the Commission looks at, oftentimes anything over $100,000 we look at just to see what's going on, and I think for the Commissioners to sign off is fine. You're moving your savings, you're checking, you're doing different things, but just for public awareness, it's probably reasonable that we do that. So, any other discussion? Roll call vote.
Strand?
Yes.
Gehrig?
Yes.
Pepcorn? No. Grinberg?
Aye.
Mahoney?
Aye. Is there any other business? John, no birthdays to talk about?
No birthdays.
So, internet sales, and sales tax for 1 quarter, City of Fargo, we got 233,000. Bendel says he thinks that's going to go up this month because everybody's sitting at home not anything to do, and they go on their computers and buying stuff, I'm hoping. But that'll be a considerable amount of income for the community, and it's great to see that people are now capturing those taxes. Any other business? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
Aye.